This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me here on Think Future. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays over Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Sure. So I'm Jordan. I'm a PhD student at Imperial College London, and I also run an education consultancy called Ask Jordon Ltd, which is conveniently titled after my own name, and because why not? And
Not hard to forget.
yeah, not hard to forget. And yeah, the thing I'm passionate about is really making education more accessible, but not in the traditional way of just making it more accessible from perspective of diversity, but bringing education to different places where people can access it more readily and more freely, but from a place of making education more interesting, because often education doesn't have to be stuffy people standing in front of just in a robotic demeanor, just standing in the front of a class and purely focusing on results. You can make it lived experiences and really something that people can learn to love, not just have to do.
Well, how did it get to be the way it is today? I mean, everyone's familiar with the original model, the old model. I mean, was it effective at some point, and it's not effective any longer, or like how did it become what it is?
So I would say there's two sides of this. So you have the current model for what I would say most people's educational experiences from school age all the way through to pre-college. That's what I would argue is what was the system that has been designed by industry and it's for industry, and it's why it's very much, do you fit this mold? Are you within this box? And it's very much because that used to be what our manufacturing base needed. Were you someone who was capable of amassing a number of skills very quickly? I could pick you up and put you in a room and basically leave you to it. Fortunately and unfortunately, we've diversified the education system. So we are not just learning core fundamental skills, we are learning a variety of subjects, but the model hasn't changed. And I would argue on the flip of this, you also have the university and more scholastic experience, which has been around for far longer than the traditional education system. The caveat, however, is a lot of the philosophical element, the research element, has largely been replaced by an advancement in more, I would say, some of the same factory style education system. And the problem is it works to a degree and then doesn't work long term, purely because we need a more adaptive workforce. We need a more reactive employee. And the other side of that is, what we don't like to say is, we like the idea of people having independence and being able to think for themselves, but we don't want that in employees. And therefore we don't.
So why do we teach them that if we?
Yeah. So therefore, yeah, exactly. So, and I think unfortunately that's the element. Until you get to a PhD, you don't really have the philosophical element left in the higher education system even now, because it's not seen as wanted, personally anyway.
So, so we're putting out people who are ill prepared for the world, right? It sounds like that. It sounds like that we're taking them down a path that no longer exists. Well, sorry, we're taking them down a path towards a destination that no longer exists. Or is there still something there for people?
I think there is still something there for people. I think the problem is we profoundly forget what education's purpose is. I can remember being taught by many teachers over my educational time, and most of them will have said, oh yeah, so you don't have to do maths after a certain point. You don't have to do English after a certain point. You are still using them constantly. The skills just evolve. It's not lifelong learning is something that people view as a logical fallacy, and it's not. It is something that is essential for it. The problem is we're training people for the workplace, and even within the workplace, they don't necessarily know what they want. I would say most corporations and businesses don't know what they want. They want someone who is oven ready. I can, again, pick them up, put them in their role, but I don't want to develop them. I want them to be fantastic at their job, because look how we do appraisals, as a prime example, another outdated concept, really. No one can get a 5 because they're always working towards something. But when someone is working towards something, we put them in the job, we give them the responsibility, but we don't give them the pay. Or we put them in a role where we see how they fit, and we don't provide the framework for education. I was thrown into a teacher training job before I did my teacher training. I was teaching for 2 years before I had any formal qualifications at all. And the caveat of that is the students were still technically, and they were paid by the state, but they're technically paying something towards being taught by someone who hasn't yet got a formal qualification. And half the time, the people who are telling you to teach in a certain way aren't people who then practice what they preach. They're doing the same PowerPoint presentation style that they've been telling you. This doesn't work in the classroom.
Right.
Okay, so why?
But that sounds
you
completely
teaching me this?
backwards. Why would they throw you in at the deep end without actually showing you how to do it? Is that
Yeah, and I think this is the problem. I think development is something that is almost seen as a dirty word. We want people to be ready. Therefore, we need people to have 2 to 3 years longer post-educational experience. But the problem is, where do they get that? Because if you're an employer and I'm telling you're going to take on this person, and I'm saying you're the person who's got to develop these people on, and then they go off and go in to get the higher paid job elsewhere. What is your incentive to train that person up? Absolutely nothing, because they're either going to leave you or
Yeah, I mean, so they want you to be oven ready, but you're not never going to be that, because every corporation has its own requirements, right? They have their own thinking, their own training, their own way of doing things, but they're not interested in taking you there. They just want you to learn on your feet, like the moment you get there. So it's almost like you have to be taught to learn how to learn. And I don't think the education system does a really good job of doing that.
Well, I mean, I don't think, as someone who's taught, I also don't think it does a good job at doing that. For a prime example is, look how we're handling the AI discussion at the moment.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying AI is the silver bullet that will solve education. I think somehow it will be used in a way that makes problems where there wasn't one. The opportunities where it would be to fix one won't be used correctly, and it'll just end up making some people will use it very well, and some people will continue to fall behind. And that's because there won't be a strategy to it. It'll be, here are the tools, go along with it. And you'll have people who resist, or people that use it wrong, and then you'll have the mavericks who excel at it, but the mavericks will have probably excelled at it regardless of if they had the training or not. But if you look at it from the point of view of, we are still grading students based on their memory, and we were doing this before, since we've had the internet, since we've had various other tools. And you could argue, why do I need to retain all of this information off the top of my head? Even if you're so I've got a number of friends who are training or have trained to be doctors or vets. 9 times out of 10, if they're looking at something, they aren't remembering it. They're going onto the computer and they're saying, these are the symptoms. They're having the ability to discern what is the correct information from the various lists that are there. They don't need to remember it, but we still grade them based off recall. And when people say, oh, but we need to do that to check their competency, there are other ways of checking someone's competent without just giving them a standardized test or giving them something that tests basic comprehension. And I personally would like us to go down the route of more, what is your thought process? What's your methods? How are you approaching this? Because I get more of an understanding of seeing someone's working than I do from seeing someone's answer in a lot of cases. If their answer's wrong, then to some degree I can find out where they've gone wrong with that. If I know, okay, they missed a comma here in the code, they missed dash in this particular prompt, and therefore the machine's misinterpreted it, or they've used the wrong keyword, and the wrong keyword in the search for the paper has completely misinterpreted the assignment. All that is fine, but then I can understand where they've gone wrong. Whereas if I have 20 students with the same answer, I can't tell which ones thought longer about it, which ones approached it from a more constructive way, whether they've resisted the answer, gone more proactive in the answer. I don't know that process if it's not there in front of me, and I think that's something the education system has been lacking long since AI has been a discussion point. I would argue since we moved from physical library books to being able to access the internet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, there's actually so many of these false situations that are created, like the testing you were talking about, like when you're, or for example, something like a job interview. It's like a job interview. When you get somebody in a job interview, you're basically testing somebody's memory. Do you remember this piece of code? Do you remember how to do this? Do you remember how to do this? But once you're in work, once you're in the job, you don't have to remember any of it. You just go onto the internet and find the answer to things. So it's almost like we're educating people to live in a world without the tools that we have everywhere, which makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, we should basically just say, look, the internet's going to be here, the tools are going to be here, AI is going to be here. Let's educate people for that world and let them leverage all those things in whatever they need to know and whatever job they need to do.
Well, it's like a prime example of this, though, and this is where I think we misunderstand it, and this is how I would argue managers misunderstand it. Is so take head teachers or deputy heads. One of the first things that they'll do, or a lot of them will do, is they take the approach of, okay, we're bringing in AI, we can now standardize you all as teachers. So you are all producing the same type of content, and it's everything's entirely uniform. And then it's
Wow.
like, so you're taking the creativity out of the classroom, and then the way that students learn through games, through activities, through workshops, the way that it's been proven with research that really hits home, you're going to remove that. And then the argument would be, could I replace the creativity in the classroom with AI? Probably not. Can I replace the robot who's sitting there with let's say a person who's sitting on the screen like I am now, giving the similar gestures, reading off reams of information that has been stored in its archive? Yeah, I could program something to give a lecture. It'd be probably quite easy to do. I mean, with the technology that we've got today, we could do that. I mean, I can go onto a normal, let's say, just a content creating app and give it a script and give it an avatar that it's going to read the script out. I can get it to do it in different languages if I want to. But the creativity, the getting the students to interact, getting them to work together, and the same with the testing side of that. We still test people individually. In most workplaces, yes, you're graded off your individual performance, but you're also graded as part of your team's performance, your company's performance. But we don't assess that type of approach, and we don't approach interdisciplinary work as much as we should do. All of that comes later, and the fact that we haven't done that for arguably, I would even say 80 years, never mind 50 or 20 years, just purely because it's not the done way. And yeah, that's because we had an individual focus system, and the individual focus system has not changed.
Well, this concept of just eradicating the individual personalities of the teachers must be insane. That's terrible. I mean, how can anybody want that? I mean, why do they want to bring in all this uniformity?
Largely because I take the UK as an example, which is where I'm based. Is most of the time it's because the view of how the regulators approach things is these are the tick boxes that they're going to question the students against and question the staff against. Therefore, if everyone's really uniform, we'll end up with a better grade. Then all of a sudden the grades will go down, and it's like, oh, grades are slipping. We need to be more uniform. And it's the whole point of if rather than if at first you don't succeed, try again. It's more if something has gone catastrophically wrong, and you no matter how many times you try, it seems to be going worse. Only an idiot will continue to go down the path
Right.
of trying to
The definition of insanity, doing the same
Yeah,
thing over and over again and expecting
exactly.
different results.
Yeah, and I think that's largely the point. And I think from my perspective as a teacher as well as a researcher is we just undervalue what the students can already bring into the classroom. Part of the premise is we as teachers need to be giving them knowledge. There have been countless papers that find the students can find the insights themselves if given the right direction or the right tools. What we need to do is give them the ambition, the skills, the reason to go and look there in the first place. And if they like it, then they'll continue to do it. If they hate it, they won't do it.
Yeah.
They'll actively avoid it. They might be really polite as university students can be, and sit in a 3-hour seminar, not physically leave, not be disruptive, but they could fall asleep.
Yeah.
It happens more often in different. I've been in many a lecture theatre when I've seen people fall asleep, and an argument where some people will put it as a bit of a challenge. Count how many people have fallen asleep in one particular lecturer's seminar, and it happens.
Well, what would you say needs to change for this to work? Because I think a lot of disruption. This will cause a lot of disruption to the existing system. If you like what you were talking about, it needs to be changed.
I think profoundly you need to give value back into. So I would say this is the same view as in person and online. If someone is doing an in person class or they're doing an online class, it needs to be active. They need to be doing something, communicating, workshops, working in groups, doing a project. I would scrap exam-based assessments straight away. I'd have a competency-based component for key skills where they set a practical task, and that you can apply that for anything, whether that be mathematics with a problem, science with experiment, sports with various different games or challenges, or physical performance targets to meet. You can do that for every subject, and do that purely for a competency measure rather than some form of multiple choice or even short answer and long answer test. Then the workshop and project style, you'd have a workshop or project which is going on throughout that academic year, where the teachers are there as facilitators, supporting the workshop design, supporting that experience. And crucially, where I think AI comes in, AI, and I've trialed this to some degree with students before, where I haven't made it powerful enough where it's had enough tokens to be able to be more spread further. But basically, where I provide all of my lecture materials for the AI, the student then fundamentally engages with the AI outside of my teaching time. They can ask various questions. Then homework isn't really a thing. If they have a question that they didn't understand, they ask this very specific program. Okay, so what? Let's say they were looking at because my background's agriculture. Let's say they're asking a question on soil science and soil health. What are indicators of soil health? They type in these various questions rather than give them the answer. That it gives them, okay, so which ways are you thinking about this from? Are you thinking about it from the farmer, the ecologist, that type? So it's continuing to get the student to think about it. And then crucially, when all my students are interacting with it, the system generates a report that, from my point of view, when I facilitate the classroom discussion the following week or the following day, I can see, okay, Bobby, James, and Jimmy really struggled with this area about knowing what they were looking for in soil health, whereas Anne and Marie struggled to understand what were the particular measures that they were going to use as indicators. And therefore, I can know, okay, so when I go in and work with these students, I need to work with measures for one, and I need to know the purpose for the others, and teach that in a different way to reinforce it in the next lesson, either practically or by giving them additional support. And crucially, the AI can provide that real-time asynchronous learning, whereas the teacher can then go into okay, I'm going to facilitate a really meaningful discussion for you where you're going to debate with each other, you're going to interact, you're going to work and understand these skills. And I'm going to help you understand not only how I use this, but how you could use this in various different jobs, because often you might be doing this for one and very different in a different role, depending on what approach you're going to take this forward. And that would be my way of reinventing the system. And I do think teachers could do that on an online and an in-person method without doing themselves out of a job for if they decide to go, okay, I want an online-based lecture. Why would someone come into that? You can still make online experiences more interactive and workshop focused. It's a myth that it's only in person that can do that. In person is easier, but online happens as well. I just think you can't. If I was sitting here now and giving you a PowerPoint presentation, a computer can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Someone can. I'm not sure about you. I watch most when I watch recordings of lectures. I watch it on two times speed. So why would I sit
Always.
there and watch it in real time? There's no point.
Yeah. So I have a couple things out of this. So this Jordon LLM is different from regular LLMs, though. It's not going to give you the answers. It's just going to respond with more questions. Is that right?
It's responding by reframing their focus. So yeah, more questions. It would help them to reapproach the method. So go, okay, so what method are you using? Have you thought about this method instead? Not giving them the answer, but may help them support the method if they're fundamentally missing the method.
Right. So that's what makes it different from a typical LLM, because a typical LLM would probably just give you the answer. So you would have to program it in such a way that it would not provide the answer, but like you say, reframe the question. Have you already built that?
Yeah, so I trialed it on Launch Lemonade through prompt engineering using Claude's API. And that was, what I modeled it on. Then I put it into my website for a trial and basically let students interact with it, let them engage with it. Fundamentally, I could do this while I was sleeping because if a student wanted to interact with it at 11 o'clock at night, I didn't need to be up at 11 o'clock at night to do that. And that gives students an extra value from the teacher, which is when they want to engage with it. But equally, the teacher doesn't have to be present. And that's a core value, because I think the other thing with technology that people often forget is they say, oh yeah, we can get teachers to do X, Y, and Z. Fine. But have you actually asked the teacher if they have the capacity to do X, Y, and Z? If it makes their job harder and they're already overstretched, are they going to use it? Probably not.
Right. Right. So does this harken back to like the Socratic method of teaching? Is that what it's leaning towards?
Yeah, largely. I've always taken the approach, and it's similar to what I touched on earlier, which was I view we have our critical analysis, which is the bit that we focus on with the answer, and I think we need to focus on the thoughtfulness of the question. But for the last 80 or so years, since I would say the standard model of education has been largely successful, which was when it was used for factory work, we forgot about the thoughtfulness of why we're doing what we're doing, the reflection, the underpinning. And unfortunately, that's evidence in the output that we do it for a job, we do it for a pay, we do it because it's going to lead to a job or pay. If you ask someone, okay, so do you generally like what you're doing? Oh no, but it's going to pay the bills at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's
almost every job is like that, right?
yeah. That's what I mean. But it should only ever be one of the reasons. It shouldn't be the only motivation that you have for pursuing all subjects, because eventually, when you hit burnout or you hit some form of obstacle, the individual changes what they're doing. They have a career break. They have a career change, and if you're someone who's trying to motivate an employee who's only purely there for the money, it's from a company point of view. You want them to stay and you want them to like what they do. They might like the job, but if they hate what they do, they're eventually going to change for whatever reason.
But how do we get people to go back to thinking about education for education's sake as opposed to education for job's sake?
I think fundamentally it's easier to start with the younger generation than it is to start with the older generation. The younger generation, it needs to be from the point of you're learning because you are more than just the title, the role that you're going into of that particular time period. Right. And I think to a degree with the younger generation as they come through, a lot might get dismissed for this, but they're building they try to build brands on social media. They try to sell products. They are marketing themselves as an individual and a whole individual. If you look at what we used to tell kids probably 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, don't put anything online because people might see that and they might. Whereas now people are saying, oh, put it online. So within reason, depending on what you've still got to be mindful of it, but generally your online presence in academia, in education, in music, art, science, all of that can add value to your various platforms and brands. And I don't think it's as dirty a word as it used to be, so long as it's, I would say, still to an extent largely professional focused or not, let's say, an abrasive form of content where
it supports your brand. You support your brand across the board. Yeah.
And that's, I think the younger generation get that. Some of the older generation do get that as well. I think the difference is, from their point of view, it's saying, okay, so these are the skills that you've built. But if you want to be lean and flexible, you've also got to recognize that this is how you future-proof yourself, because the forever job, the job till you retire, is unfortunately likely not going to be the case. You have increasing changes in where job insecurity is becoming more and more prevalent, and benefits, end of career benefits are few and far between now. And so it's, how do you do that? If I was a corporation, I'd be saying, okay, so these are the various different training systems I'm going to invest in for you, but I'm going to invest in it to incentivize either your security or flexibility, but I'm going to have that open and frank discussion with you, not just from a point of view of, okay, here's a continued professional development day because it looks good or it's a tax break. Tell them why you want them to do it, but equally be prepared that you've got to develop either where you want to take them forward or where you want to develop them further so they go off somewhere else, and be prepared for that because you recognize you might be the middleman for their career, and be happy about that. Whereas it's easier to say than it is to do in practice, because why would you train someone up to have them disappear? But if you don't want them to disappear, think about where you want their growth. And there are some places where they focus too much on growth, and then you have people who actually just want to be in that role, perfectly content in that role. They don't want to move. So therefore, how do you support them in that way?
Exactly.
Encourage them to maybe learn a language or something like that. Not because, but because it might be just useful for them. They might like it, and encourage that.
Exactly. So it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2035, 2036, depending on when this airs. Where do you see us? Where do you see the system in 10 years? Do you think they're actually going to change, or do you think we're going to be stuck where we are?
I will approach this from a point of view of thinking where I would like it to go, and where the research would suggest we need to go is we're going to see fewer universities, but more specialized universities where we have more workshop interactions, where the researchers and the teachers are more aligned together, and we have more outreach with schools so that we're developing forward with careers seeing, okay, so these are the broad skills that we want for biological sciences, for let's say for physics and so on, and these are the core skills we want. Now, that's the bachelor's degree. Then we want to specialize in these areas of what we need to see specialization in for research or for our industries. That's what I hope we go down the route of. More likely, unfortunately, is I see we continue to talk about AI for 10 years. We don't really decide what we're going to do with it. We probably decide we're going to try and ban AI in schools, which won't work.
Seriously?
There'll be that approach. We'll do some form of, okay, we'll introduce it for teachers to use as a standardization tool, and we may bury our heads in the sand to some degree, and we then basically regress into closed book assessments where students can't access computers at all, and we try to regress in some cases.
Oh my God, that would make things worse. That would make things terribly worse if they decide to go that route.
I hope it doesn't go that way, but that is, I think, similar to a lot of routes. I think A is the optimist, and I think the way we can constructively build, and universities are going that way. Schools, unfortunately, are probably more likely going to go down option B because they just don't know what they're doing with it, and will unfortunately, I think if you go if schools and teachers go down B, their job security, in my view, actually goes down quicker with B than it does with A. A shows value, you show flexibility, you're lean and adaptable for A, and with B you are trying to resist change. And what you'll have is you'll have the maverick schools that everyone will go to, and you'll have failing schools that stay in B, and that is the the clearer options that I can see emerging.
Wow. Are you seeing any schools heading down the B path right now? Because that seems like very regressive and backwards.
Yeah, and surprisingly enough, I see this with surprisingly some, I would say, quite outspoken academics who think, oh, I need to go down this route for my university class as well. And it's like, it's no one thought about how do I improve with this technology rather than how do I go back and maintain. But half of the time, it's either met because you don't want to try and you don't want to try to innovate. There is an element of fear in it where I don't understand it. Therefore, if I'm not confident in using it, so I might be making myself redundant because I don't know. And yeah, I think there'll be an element of people who are dragged along who will eventually change. There'll be people who resist up to the point they retire, and there'll be people who really take to it. And what my view is, you try to get this at the teacher training, at the lecturer training. Those are the people who are going to be able to bring this through, and then upper management should progressively evolve with it. Should.
Well, so let's hope things go down the A path. So this has been great,
Exactly.
really interesting. So why don't you tell us if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So if someone wants to get in touch with me, they can follow me on virtually all social media platforms. Either it'll be at Ask Jordon, which is TikTok, Instagram, and all the what I would class as the short form content. In LinkedIn, Jordan Millwood. By all means, please drop me a message, or on Substack, Ask Jordon is the way you can get in touch. Drop me a message on there, and yeah, please do get in touch. I'm more than happy to answer any questions on education or AI in education, because while it's not my core research area, it's an area I'm very much interested in.
Very cool. Well, I'll drop all of that in the show notes so people can go direct. So thank you so much. This has been great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.